Welcome to International Love Story, the podcast about intercultural relationships. My name is Christina, and in today's podcast episode, I'm going to welcome Mareike and Kim. They are obviously both dating interculturally, and what's special is that they're siblings. Since day one, since they are both dating interculturally, they're supporting each other. So they have built their own support system, and in the future they're going to extend this support system as they are going to offer their services to other intercultural couples as well. I had so much fun talking to them as we've talked about everything. What I found interesting is how they're blending families, how they're raising kids, and what experience they've made. Because even though Kim and Mareike are so different, there are also so many similarities in the path they've taken. With this being said, enjoy today's episode.
Your partner is leaving, and then what do? You're alone.
There's no wrong answer. There's no wrong opinion.
My last message would be, really don't underestimate culture shock. It comes in many different shapes and sizes. And really, I think having a community like this one, for example, is so important. To listen to other people's stories, to see what they're going through, because you're not alone. And whatever you are going through, maybe someone else is also going through.
In today's episode, I would like to welcome Kim and Mareike. I'm so excited to have them as my guests today because we're in contact since a while already, and both of them, they are building an intercultural community as well, but this is something we're gonna get into later on in this conversation. For now, I would like to welcome both of them. Thank you so much for being here today. Hi, glad to be here. Very happy for having us. Before we start getting into the conversation of how you guys met your partners, I would like to learn a little bit more about you. As mentioned before, we know each other already, but then I don't think I know the whole background story. And especially for everyone who is listening and watching right now, it might just be interesting to know exactly where you're from, what you're doing, where you're living at the moment. So tell us all about you.
Hello, everybody. We are Kim and Mareike, and I know that normally you interview couples, but maybe it's important to say that we're not a couple. We're sisters. We're sisters, but we all have in common that we are in intercultural marriages. I'm the younger sister, 2 years younger, and my husband is Venezuelan Spanish, and your husband is Italian. Exactly. And so we're both German. We've been born and raised in Munich, Germany, and that's where we currently live. But we haven't always lived here. We've traveled around, lived abroad for a while. You've lived in several countries, China, Dubai, France, Singapore, me as well. Lived in Colombia, France, Singapore. So in the US, we both lived in the US. Yeah. So we've been, traveling and living abroad most of our lives. But now we've come back because here we're raising our children. We each have 2 daughters, and we love being close to each other because we're just very close as sisters, and we have this joint experience of being in intercultural relationships,
which is quite rare, to be honest, because if I think back when Nacho and I, when we started dating, even in my inner circle, family, friends, I didn't know anyone was dating interculturally. And now having you guys sitting on the other end, I mean, it's just Munich on the other end of Germany. Both of you in an intercultural relationship is quite interesting, if I may say so. I also know that in your case, it was independent from each other, obviously, because you met your husband while living abroad, if I remember correctly, right?
The story is quite fun because it is independent, but it's also somehow connected. That's probably the even more fun twist in how we both met our partners. So I met my husband in 2010 on the other side of the world, literally. We were studying or doing an international MBA in Singapore. and I met him in the classroom. So we spent a few months there together, and then moved to France together to finish the MBA. And thereafter, then was the question, where would we live and so on. And then we went to Dubai. And we can get into the details of that later. But then Mareike actually came to visit me in Singapore for Christmas. And I think that's where you take over.
Yeah, and exactly. So I visited you, and I was absolutely fascinated by this whole MBA that you were doing. Met your, well, then boyfriend, and I just spent a lot of time with the people, with the whole group that you were with, and I was just fascinated.
I mean, we might want to add that very international, that the MBA we did was with 70 different or over 70 different nationalities in a classroom or a class of 200 people on the Singapore campus. So it was already the surroundings were very international, people from all over. And I think that's also part of what fascinated you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was like, I want to have this experience. And also, a lot of times in my life, you've been my role model. And I've just sort of gone down the path because it worked for you. And so I was like, that's a really good idea.
Despite many times saying, I don't want to do what Kim does.
Yeah. And in the end, I kind of did it. It always turned out really well. No, but in this case, I visited you, and I remember leaving with the thought of, I want to do this as well. So I got home, I applied for the same MBA, and 2 years later, I also started in Singapore, same school. And I was sitting in the classroom. I looked to my right, and there he was, my future husband. So that's how we met. Yeah, and it was the same. So we spent a few months in Singapore, then moved to France together. And then over the course of a year, or within this time, we had to decide, is this gonna work? Are we going to, invest in this relationship? And are we going to take this further? And that means coming up with a plan of, where do we go from here? Where do we move to? Because he had given up his job from before. I kind of still had an attachment to the company that I was working for. And so I remember that moment where we sat down in front of a whiteboard and basically mapped out the world and made a list of all the countries and then cities that we could imagine to live in, where it was realistic to live in terms of jobs and all that. And then he started applying, and he got a job offer in Munich, and that's how we ended up here. And you came here later after.
Yeah, so for us it was actually to some extent similar. When we got into the phase of, okay, we need to decide, first of all, are we committed to each other, and how do we make sure that it works, and how do we figure out if it works? For us, one of the arguments or one of the aspects was that we said we need to move to a neutral place, so to say. Because during the MBA, I mean, when you're studying, you're all in a bubble, it's all happy, you go party, it's all fun, but then, real life has a bit of a different pace. So we agreed on, okay, it needs to be a third place, and we kind of did the same thing. Checked where we both had possibilities to get job offers, and in the end, my company actually delegated me to Dubai, and he had an offer in Milano from a company, and then asked that company if he can transfer that one to Dubai, and that's how Dubai got our neutral place, our third place, and we ended up. Initially, we thought we would do like a year or so, just to figure out, is it working? And I ended up staying for 3.5 years. He stayed for 4.5 years. So we had a year of long distance, and that was just due to my contract expiring. And so I had to get back to Munich, and then he followed me. And that's how we ended up in Munich. We did a few curves in between, but eventually that's how we both ended up here and even bought a house.
May I ask, before we get into like the further steps, what happened next, how old were you guys when you met your nowadays husband?
So I was, I was 26, turning 27. So it's about 9 years ago.
Yeah, and I was 25, turning 26, and was 2010. So, and he is 4 years older.
It's been a while.
Yeah. I have the same reaction when I try to remember, okay, which year did we or I moved to Miami? How old was I when we got to know each other? Yeah, because in our case, it's like 8 years now. So 8 years of knowing each other, 7 years of being in a relationship. But it's like, you just get so used to that. So that you just, at some point, you just can't remember the time before, and which is so weird as well at the same time. Yes. Yeah.
And that's
Anyway,
that I find that actually a very interesting aspect, because I sometimes feel, because we've moved so much, because there are so many things you need to figure out, it feels like time moves even faster than it already does. And that also, I mean, for example, the time that we spent in Dubai, to me, it feels like it's decades ago, and it was super long. And in the end, yeah, I mean, I came back in 2015, so not even 10 years ago, but still, it feels like a whole another lifetime back then.
You both decided separately, so as sisters, like talking, you guys as sisters, that you would like to spend the next few years in Munich. I guess there were several reasons for that. As I understood, Mareike, on your end, it was mainly because you just had the best possibilities when it comes to profession, and also was probably a lifestyle. And for you, Kim, it was a little bit different. So you were going back to Germany first, and then you go the other way around.
For us, we first went to a neutral place, or to Dubai, and then eventually said, okay, the relationship is working. We also had a lot of conversations about, okay, where can we imagine living? Is it clear that we'll be living in Germany and in Italy? What would we try first? Where are the opportunities, and so on? And then a bit, it's also always guided by the opportunities that come up in a certain moment. So we did have a period where my husband had actually moved to Germany on a like a
Delegation? Or?
Yeah, it wasn't a delegation, but like a time-limited contract.
Okay.
Non-permanent contract. And basically to try how it is working here, if you can imagine it. So we also always tried to, the steps that we took, we tried to take them in a relatively safe manner, so that we had a possibility to take a plan B step, so to say. But he also had a moment where he had an opportunity in Italy, and we said, okay, because it is a fair, or it was something that we always said we consider as a possibility to move as a family to Italy. He actually did 6 months in Italy working there, figured out that at that time and that with that company it didn't work, or there were like several reasons, but overall it was not he decided that's not a possibility to pursue further, and that especially he didn't want to move the family, not having a job that he loved doing. And so he actually came back to Munich. So we tried different things as well. I mean, we're fortunate enough that we have the possibilities to do that. And then he eventually actually changed even job here, and is super happy now with what he's doing. But I think that's also important to add. That doesn't mean that we'll stay here forever. Yeah. There is always a conversation ongoing, and always an opportunity or a possibility, and a lookout for opportunity to say, okay, are we going to move abroad in general, but specifically to Italy as well? Because yes, objectively, there can be a lot of reasons why it's easier right now from an economic perspective, from a workplace perspective, from a safety perspective, whatever. I mean, and Italy is not a bad place to live, don't get me wrong, but if you compare it specifically where we're living, but however, it's his home, it's his soul is partially there. And so we always have that when we travel to Italy quite frequent, or try to travel quite frequently, and he always says it takes him a few hours or a few days until his soul has actually moved back over the Alps, back to Munich. And we really noticed that, and I've learned to be aware of it, and also be sensitive about it, and help him in that first phase of, okay, now he's back in Munich, where yes, everything is going great, but
the weather is not
but that at the moment in Italy also. So no, but it is. I mean, obviously it's a different lifestyle. His friends are there.
And and as much as you can build up relationships and routine and all these things, I mean, we all know the word Heimat in German. It has a special place, and I think that's something that for us, we try to always be very aware of that.
How is it, may I ask? Because I see you, I know that you as siblings, you're very close to each other. I mean, this is also what you've mentioned before, Mareike, that Kim is your role model. How many years is difference do you guys have, may I ask, like age-wise?
2 years. So Kim is 2 years older than I am.
You've been through a few things together. You've been on a few adventures. You, Mareike, more or less, you follow a few of the footprints your sister's leaving, which I think is very heartwarming to me, because I have a little sister myself and I'm very close to her. The decisions, I mean, we are in the middle of the conversation already, which I love, but the decisions you have made the past few years, did you consider the other side as well? Like in that case, your sister, did you keep an eye on, okay, what is she doing? Maybe we can match that as well. Was that maybe also partial-wise a reason for you to even move to Germany, or do you really separate one from the other? So your family, so your own family, and then your sister and the family on the other side.
So I think that's a good question, but I think generally, of course, each one of us, I think we have learned to adapt such a flexible mindset, and that we see our lives in phases, and that means that if the decision is good for either one of our families, meaning our husbands, us, and our kids, then it would never be the case that I would say, oh no, you can't go, you can't move, you have to stay exactly where I am. But that being said, we are happiest the more we get to see of each other. And during Corona, the whole pandemic, we were such support for each other. So that was good. But I also remember that there were years when I was studying in a different town, and I think that was actually when you were in Dubai, or you were. So there were several years where we just didn't see each other a lot, maybe 2, 3, 4 times a year. But nevertheless, we've always kept in contact.
Well, and we go visit each other.
And we go visit each other.
Exactly. So, I mean, I think that is, I think we do not make the decisions for our individual families depending on the sister, because for that, it's also too complex to do that already in between two cultures and a couple in general, I think. However, what we do is we share a lot of the feelings, we share a lot of the process and getting to the decision individually. I talk a lot with my husband, but I will as much talk with Mareike and say, how do you see that? Help me go through also the emotions of, okay, I'm super excited. Oh no, whoa, we're actually doing it. I'm getting scared, or okay, what do I need to keep in mind? So I think it's rather than making it a decision dependent, it's a decision support. That we do, and where we also benefit from being in a very similar situations, because we just know we both either have done certain things that the other one is about to do or will be doing, or is thinking about doing, or will be doing, and so I think that part is where it really helps us to have similar perspectives due to the choices we made with our part.
So whenever there's a big decision waiting ahead of you, you obviously talk to each other as well, and you are the support system. But both families, I guess, obviously, for sure, your husbands as well, obviously.
For sure.
But, I mean, yeah.
But for jokes aside, I think they have learned that we do have a decent amount of influence on each other. and I mean, that's why also we try to actually also spend time together with them, right? Because they also feel a certain bond, being two Latino or coming from two Latino cultures, and having married two German sisters who are enjoying when it's raining outside, and they can't understand why there's no bad weather in Germany. So, I mean, we have our jokes, they have their jokes and so on. And that's actually also, I think, it helps them as well to feel less alone in certain moments where maybe it's more difficult to deal with us or deal with certain German things, or just in general, the fact that they're both living in a different place, that they're both, I mean, for your husband more than for mine, but have countries where it's very difficult to say right now, oh, I'm just going to move there, let's just try. And I think that helps them also to then sometimes exchange on that part. And we're thankful that they found their connection as well.
That would have been my next questions. How you get along? No, oh, good. It's very interesting because this is exactly what I've said. I mean, and also what I'm mentioning almost all the time in the podcast is when Nacha and I were dating, I didn't have a support system, but knowing that you had this, even if it was just like two people, like in many exclamation marks, obviously, two people, which is in that case your sister and her partner, and being able to support each other, I guess that helped you through a lot of decision making the past few years as well.
Yeah, and also it's a lot of times it's the small things, and it's the same for our husbands when they can complain about, just let some steam off about something that they find super annoying about Germany, and the same for us. We can, team up together and say, oh, I don't know, I can't think of anything right now, but like something that we would say, oh, that's incredible that this is normal in Spain and Italy, and it's just because you don't always want to say every complaint towards the person that is from that culture. So we are, I call it, so here's my term for that, I call it, we are cultural bitching buddies, and that really helps because we just can go on and on about how there's just white bread in Spain and Italy, and how we love our German bread and how much we miss it when we're abroad, and that just helps because we can,
it's in a safe space, and you don't risk hurting someone, even if you don't intend to, because honestly, I don't want to hurt any Italian or Spanish because of white bread. It's just, it's a moment where I have a problem, not they have a problem, right? And but it's easy. It's very easy, especially when, we also talk in our course about culture shock and so on. It's very easy to say, oh, but why do you only have white bread? And here we have the bread, and it's healthier, and it's nicer, and I don't know. And so being able to do that with each other and fully understanding the feeling is somehow also, it makes it easier then to go through certain things and have less risk in offending.
And you both feel crazy at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And sometimes we're like, so
yeah, no, it's bonding, it's fun, it's safe, it's relaxing, and I think that's, like I said in the beginning, this is as true for us as it is for our husbands, because they have something in common and we have something in common.
And I think it also then extends to the groups that you form or that you find once you live in a different place. So we, for example, have actually you guys too. Have the fortune that our kids go to a German-Italian kindergarten, and then having a lot of other couples in the same situation with a German partner and an Italian partner, it helps have exactly that same kind of conversation, but in a safe and a cozy environment, because in the end we know we're all on the same boat. We all took those decisions because in the end we love that other person, and by that also that other culture, and yet it is just okay that there are certain things we don't get along with or that we can't adjust to or whatever. So, and I think you guys have it too.
Yeah, for sure. Talking about adjusting and cultural adjustment, how do you handle that? So how was it for you when moving to all those places you've been living together?
So I'm thinking, I think despite like living in different countries and, spending a year here, spending a few months there, I've always try to engage with the culture, integrate and all that, be open-minded. But I think I've never done this as consciously as when I started living with someone, as when I had to spend my day-to-day life with someone because we're married, we have kids and all that. That's when I started, at least for my part, I started putting in real conscious work, because I realized, oh, this is not just about, eating the food or being open-minded. It's so much deeper than that. It's so much more complex than that. And so I have changed a lot. I've changed a lot. Like imagine that your whole life, when spending a life with someone in a marriage, imagine that you always sort of run against the wall and you try to like bend a wall, and you put all this energy in it, and you will never succeed, right? So I just learned I could have insisted on, staying in all my German ways of doing something, but the way that the easier way and the more sustainable way for the whole project, which is a marriage, is to give way. But of course, it's not only me who can do that; it's also my partner. So I think we both give way to each other, and that way you start changing. And that's what I love. Now, looking back at that person that I was 10 years ago and the person that I am now, I think I've become much, much better at a lot of things.
I think for me, a big part is acceptance of it's just not gonna change.
Yeah.
So stop worrying and stop fighting, because it's a lot of energy that you can put in it and say, oh, but he needs to act in a certain way, or why don't they get it, right? So it's like, if I accept that there are a lot of things that I do that are foreign to them, I look differently at things that they do. If I say they and I from the two cultures, not in terms of like confronting parties, but for us, it's been a lot of communication. Like, you can never communicate enough, like basically never. Really talking about the smallest little things and trying to figure out, is it a culture thing? Is it a personal thing? Is it a family thing? Why? Why does it bother me? Why? Not even why does it bother? Why does it surprise me? It doesn't need to be always negative. Why is it different? Why is there something that I need to adjust? Because you were asking for adjustment, that I need to adjust to. And whether that is food times when we're on vacation, whether that is how you dress kids at the beach, or whether that is also probably also in cultures that are more diverse and more different from one another, how you behave in a work setting, how you behave when you meet family, all these things, and being open-minded about it. And what I always say is, assume the best in the other person. Assume they're doing their best based on how they were raised and the knowledge that they have and the cultural imprint that they have, and then do the same yourself, right? And then if you go with that mindset and then communicate, a lot easier. And that's, I think, where the adjustment helps, because you break down some of the walls and some of the barriers in your own mind as well.
I also think that, to be honest, there's a very, very, very fine line between explaining yourself and communicating.
Yeah.
Because this is what I tend to do in the beginning, that I always felt like I have to explain myself. Why do I act in a certain way? Why am I who I am? And that was just so, as you said before, that was so time consuming, energy consuming. I was just like, why am I even doing this? He will never get me. But that's not the point. So the point is to meet in the middle and to basically grow an understanding for the other person, to be a little bit more open-minded, especially in the beginning, and then eventually you get there. But what I also noticed, I'm not sure if you can confirm that, sometimes I'm just sick of communicating. I know that. It's just like, sometimes I'm just like, okay, I just want to have a day where I'm not talking, or I don't feel like I have to communicate in a way that I have to consider, like, take different things into consideration. That can also be very draining, as I feel like.
Oh, I agree. And I had that a lot in the beginning, where I was trying to analyze every situation, and my husband was getting tired of it. He was like, I don't want to explain myself anymore. I don't want you to analyze every move that I do. And I saw it from a very interested position, I was like, oh, but I'm trying to understand, so again, I had the best intentions, but I also think I learned to sometimes just let it go and just be, and I think even if then the consequence is that maybe sometimes you communicate a bit unfortunately and maybe not with the best words. I mean, there's also a lot of power in apologizing and in giving it another try. Yeah, reflection, exactly. Coming back to it, maybe giving it some time and then picking it up again.
Yeah. And then, I mean, what you always say even more than me, but is put some humor into it, right? It's like we've had situations also with each other's families, so where parents and parents-in-law are involved and so on, where there was confusion, where there was like also a bit of like, that's really weird that they didn't do that, and it came out later. And by now we all laugh about it. And when they meet again, they refer to that episode, and they're like, okay, here, it goes like this, or remember that. So that also helping the families and the people that are impacted by the decision of those two individuals who decided to spend their life together. Probably also most of them thought it would be different. So granted to them, but to just say, okay, you know what, it's just gonna happen. It's just gonna happen. Those misunderstandings are gonna be there, and again, assume that they were not with malintention or bad intention.
You were mentioning before that your husband, so plural, cultural background, they have a lot of similarities. May I ask, how are they in making decisions? Are they the emotional part, or are they completely different?
So I know what you're gonna say, but interestingly enough, so my husband is very, with the Latin culture where there's a lot of uncertainty and you're used to just dealing with situations completely changing. He always actually has a long-term plan for his life, but he is incredibly good at adjusting to new situations. And in the beginning, that led to a lot of misunderstandings, because he would say, oh, maybe we do this for our Christmas vacation. And so in my mind, I was like, cool, it's set, and for several months, I'm looking forward to that, and I'm planning it out in my head, and I'm getting attached to the idea and all that. And then he has just simply forgotten about that option, because for him it was just a vague idea. And then I was very disappointed in the beginning, because I thought either he forgets stuff, or he just doesn't care about it, or he's changed his mind, and I couldn't catch up with that. But yeah, so he's very, very good at adapting to new situations and seeing the positive things and everything. And I dare to say I have adjusted to that. I love that. I love this flexibility and being like, oh, okay, so these friends, they cancel, so now let's do something else. And I love having this option, this flexibility now.
I think my husband in many ways is not a typical Italian. Is that what you were saying? Like, absolutely. And he says so himself, and his Italian friends say so himself. So he probably, it's easier for him to adjust to German ways of doing things, because he has some of that just in his personality, not necessarily from a cultural background. However, he does also certainly have aspects where he's totally stereotypical Italian, if you want to say that. One of the things that I struggle with is that he always double and triple plans appointments with friends. So for me, if we have, a Saturday afternoon appointment with another family, then for me that's set, that whole time is reserved for that family, and we're not doing other stuff and putting something before and after and whatever. And for him, it's, oh no, but if there's an opportunity, why don't we just put them together and they can all come, or we see them and then maybe we leave earlier and so on. And for me, I still struggle to adjust it. So, but I'm learning also that most of the times it actually goes well, and you also create new relationships between friends and other people. So it's about learning. Maybe it's not the way I do it, but I can still live with it. And let him do it. But then also there are certain moments where I say, you know what, you're doing it again. you take over the responsibility. I don't want to communicate and say, hey, sorry, we're not coming. So also that, because I was going to get worked up about it, because I felt embarrassed if we were like changing plans and whatever. So I just learned, okay, then I just don't have to take that responsibility. He can do it. And then it works out. And oftentimes people actually are just happy to see each other. Yeah. So I think it depends. It's as usual, there's a mix in what's your cultural upbringing, also what's your personality in.
And on top of all this, you are blending families as well, with now 2 kids on each side. And how does that go? I mean, I can only imagine because you had to adapt to several circumstances. You had to adapt in the beginning to another country. Then as soon as there are kids involved, it just becomes completely different dynamic, and you have to adapt again. And especially as a mother, I can imagine you want to make sure that everyone is happy all the time, always happy faces. But with cultural differences, I can imagine that can be quite interesting as well from time to time, right?
Oh, yeah. So I think any parent would probably confirm that life with kids is just more complex. And then when the cultural mix comes in, then it can get even more complex. And I think that's surely true for us. However, I think, like, thinking back when I first got pregnant with our first daughter, I remember I was super excited about that. I was super curious and excited about raising a bilingual child and, figuring out how to merge these parenting styles, and I was super excited for them to have a Venezuelan grandmother and grandfather and just all these aspects. I just loved it. But then in reality, it does get a lot of, very complex. And it starts with, like the birth, the whole pregnancy, because there are a lot of traditions around that, or expectations. And that's a whole chapter on its own, I guess.
What I find absolutely fascinating is how our kids, or especially the older one, how she's very aware of it. Like she says frequently by now, "Mom, I'm a Glückspilz" in German, so I'm a lucky mushroom. That's right, by the way. That's not so good in English. But anyway, so she just considers herself very lucky. That she speaks 2 languages, and she frequently reminds us that she is speaking them better than each of us, because she's like, "Mom, yes, you can also speak 2 languages, like both, also the Italian and German, but I can speak both of them very well." So she's very aware of it, and not in an arrogant way, but in a thankful way. By now she's correcting me in Italian, and actually both kids do that. And they have also gotten to the point where they actually tell me, "Mom, please don't speak in Italian with us, because German is the language that I speak with them. My husband speaks Italian with them." So I respect that as well, because for them it's very clear who they speak which language with. However, there are situations where if they, for example, have experienced something in Italian, let's say with the grandparents in Italy, they sometimes have, when it's very emotional, then they are like, "Okay, Mom, can we tell it to you in Daddy's language?" Because it's just they've experienced it in that cultural and linguistic context, and that to me is just fascinating. And what I find really cool lately, usually they play in German, because mother tongue, they hear more German, they speak both languages equally well, but they are starting to actually decide in which language they play, and they use it within the play, that they say, "Okay, now we play that you're Italian and you say that in Italian, and we play that I'm German." So I find that the consciousness with which they adapt to that, with which also they explain to other people, my dad is from Italy and my mom is from Germany. I love that, because I believe if they grow up in this way, and with the normalness of having different customs, different ways of doing things, different languages, I hope it's a small part to a better world in the end, because we just understand each other better, because we're all coming from different places. So I think that's a beautiful part of it. And yeah, there are a lot of challenges, but I hope that's what's going to remain for them.
It's lovely. Thank you so much for sharing that. I just imagine them playing together and then deciding before, and that's just a very, very cute picture, to be honest.
Yeah,
you guys.
And they actually, what I loved is they did it the other day with friends, and they wanted to play. I see something that you can't see. No, I'll say it in English.
I
spy something that is that you don't spy. And they were like, okay, do we play in German, in Italian, or in both languages? And so I was like, it's just fascinating, you know?
And it's really cool, I think. So at least I think that's true for both of us. Like, the topic of culture is always on the table. And I think it's so cool how conscious they are about it. But I think that's also, coming from us, because we talk about it. We take out the map and we show them where their grandmother lives, and we show them where their grandfather lives. And we talk about that you need to take a plane from here to there. And we look at pictures of animals who, live in the Amazon rainforest. And so they have that connection to that side of their cultural heritage.
Yeah. And I think one other part that you do it as well, I think, but that I try to be very aware of is when they ask me, so why does Nonna do something different? Or why do the Italian friends do something different? That I'm very conscious about, because in Italy, this is the way you do it. In Germany, this is the way you do it. And it's both fine. It's just different ways of doing it. So also, going away, even if I don't necessarily agree with everything, because I've grown up differently, because I've learned that you need to put a hat on when there's wind and whatever, they are all fine and they're all grow up. And that's something where it comes back to the acceptance and to also just letting go from your own expectations and your own needs, but telling them and explaining to them it's both fine helps them also to have less judgment themselves.
And I think also less conflict in their own identity, right?
Yes. Do they also pick from both cultures? Sorry for interrupting. Like, do they pick the best from both cultures? Or is it, because as I understood, you leave them a lot of space when it comes to, okay, which culture you might be more, let's say, attracted, I think is the wrong word for that, to in specific situations. What do you want to adopt? So they really adopt what they think is best for them and what they think is just the way to go. Or
I think so at least mine are still a little bit too young for that. They're 2 and 4. So
okay,
when I tell them they have to go to bed, they have to go to bed. But for example, they know we just spent time in Spain visiting my mother-in-law, and they know that in Spain they can stay up until it's late outside, and we only go to the playground once it's late and once it's dark outside, and they love that thought, and they know that this is special. But they also know that in Germany everybody is at home when it gets dark. Yeah.
So I also don't think mine are neither yet at the point where they consciously decide on the one or the other directions. It's more like they have special things in the one place, special things in the other place, and they do mention that. Where they do it, or especially did it in the beginning, was with the language. They learned both languages in parallel, but you could tell that they tended to use the word that was easier in a certain language first. And so they did not consequently use German words first, let's say, even though they spoke or were mainly with me. But they would use, for example, aqua for water versus Wasser in German. Aqua for them was much, much easier. So even when they spoke with me, knowing that they technically had to speak German with me, we never forced them, but it was just normal for them to do it. In the very beginning, they used the words that were easier. So there was a certain, probably at that point, unconscious move towards the easier.
Which is, by the way, a super normal. Yeah, and it's super normal for bilingual kids.
Yeah. And but I find it super fascinating because it's
just makes sense.
It just makes sense.
It's really smart. very smart about that, right? Why?
And yet it is the case that when they speak to me now and they don't know a certain word in German, for example, they know it in Italian, they have a pause because they know it's an Italian word and they technically it doesn't match with bringing it up to me, but then they can say, like, Mom, what is it in your language? So they have that conscious and yours as well, like, and that's really, really amazing. And I mean, the beautiful thing is that they all four, maybe smallest one not yet, but the other ones, they know also the languages of they don't speak them, but they're aware of the fact that her daughter speaks Spanish and mine speak Italian, and that they're similar, and I try to listen, and our husbands actually do speak to the other kids in their own languages. So my husband will speak Italian with her kids and vice versa.
And they get it. They kind of get it.
What languages do you communicate in with your partners, though? Is it Spanish and Italian?
No, actually. So my husband and I, when we met in Singapore, the whole environment and how we got to know each other was speaking English. And to this day, that's the language that we communicate most in. However, we were very lucky that he knew a bit of German before we met and I knew a bit of Spanish before we met. Okay. So there was always the factor that we could understand and speak a little bit each other's languages. And by now, he's fully fluent in Spanish, in German and me in Spanish. So if depending on the situation, we can communicate in all three languages.
Yeah.
With you was interesting.
So for us, was English initially, because I didn't speak a word of Italian except for like ciao and pizza, and he didn't speak a word of German. So for us, it was English from the beginning. We both kind of were forced somehow. Well, actually, my husband more decided that he wanted to learn German. I was to some extent forced because with his parents, his mom speaks a little bit of English, but his dad doesn't. And a lot of his friends don't speak a lot of English or not comfortably enough. So I automatically learned it by spending all that time with friends. I took a couple of hours. I bought one of those learning books and so on. And he did a Goethe course. And by now he's actually also working in some cases in German. So he's become pretty fluent in it as well. He does every day, and I really admire him for that. He does, before going to bed, the Duolingo. It's one of those apps to learn. And he does it every single day for I don't know how many years now.
It's incredible.
It's really, really incredible, really dedicated. And you notice. And so when we speak at home, we basically have all three languages. He speaks with the kids in Italian. I speak with the kids in German. And when we speak with each other, we still speak in English. And we have at the table, we'll have all three languages. It can be that he says something to the kids in Italian and I reply to the same thing in German, and it just works.
It's the same for you, no? You also speak English with Nacho.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. English is the language, but he's also doing Duolingo since 2 years, almost a single day. He's having German classes 2 hours a week, and his German got really, really good as well. But he lost the language for some reason, which I still don't understand, to be honest, because I know it's so difficult to learn. But he thinks it's just a beautiful language, especially the fact that you just can put things together and it still makes sense. And that also it's like things I'm not even thinking about anymore, like Wäscheständer.
Yeah,
it's just like it is what it is. It is what it is.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what my husband also says. He loves these names, and he says it's so descriptive. It's like German is you just describe what you see. It's a thing that flies. It's a thing that drives. It's a thing that whatever that you clean with, and you always come out with the right word.
Yeah. Just put it together. This is a very, very fascinating fact to him, and this is why he's enjoying learning German so much. So yeah, but we communicate in English as well. Eventually, I don't know how it's going to be when we have kids, but I think even then, because it's since ever it's our communication language.
Yeah, for us, we thought about changing it before our daughter was born. And then we read a bit about it as well, and it's one of the systems that's recommended, that's been studied, and for us it's been such a relief to be able to just continue using the language that was natural for us, and also to avoid the kids hearing languages not perfectly well, because if we had chosen to have either the one or the other, and we see that with some of the families in the kindergarten, where the kids struggle much more if one of the languages is the main languages language at home, because they're simply not equal in how much they hear them, and so those kids tend to struggle more in then using the other language than ours. Luckily, I mean, we don't know what's coming. Maybe one day they decide they don't want to speak German, but we'll see.
Those are a few pro trips you're giving here. I like that. Because, Mareike, you were mentioning earlier, and that's also what we talked about a little bit before I hit the record button. When you got pregnant, I think it was with the first kid, there was a little cultural shock, if you might say so. So I would like to learn a little bit more about that. What happened exactly?
Yeah, for sure. So I was pregnant, and then it got closer and closer to the birth, and we had to talk about, actually, I didn't know that we had to talk about this, but it turns out that, in my mind, I was thinking, okay, we are the family, right? My husband and I, and we're going to go into the hospital, and it's going to be the sacred moment, the sacred intimate moment of me giving birth. And it's just going to be my husband and me and the baby. Because also, that's how, what we knew from our parents, right? So that's how they...
And from friends.
And just, like everybody, sort of, that we knew that was my blueprint for that's how you have a baby. That's how you give birth. And especially also because our parents were very much hands-off in that they said, you do that. We don't need to know when it happens. We don't need to have
no pressure.
No pressure. We don't need to know when, it's time that you go to the hospital. We don't need to know when your water broke or something. You just, do whatever you need to do. And then once you're ready, once you've taken in the magic of the moment, you feel like you can call us whenever you're ready to. Turns out that in Venezuela, that's not quite how it goes. So what happens is that this moment of giving birth is an occasion, is a celebration for a bigger family, and for sure the mom wants to be there, meaning my mother-in-law, right? So for her it was it was very much her being a part of that whole experience.
The whole thing, may I ask?
No, so
okay. Because I was confused for a second. Okay.
Well, yeah. So actually, in fact, my husband's cousin, she had her mom with her in the room giving birth, and her. I don't know her sister, but yeah, but
there were
so
more people.
No, so for sure, it can definitely happen that you have your mom in your room, right? Now, of course, since this was not my mom but my mother-in-law, that's where I would have, for sure vetoed the whole idea. But it was already for me very weird, the thought of having anyone, even like waiting outside of the room where I'm giving birth, and then having anyone there. There was a big discussion around that, because even the thought of, it's also very normal that then the mom moves in for you, with you for like a month or several months, and to help after the birth. Now, this was absolutely unimaginable for me. For me, I always read about the Wochenbett, there's the first weeks after giving birth, don't accept any, don't make it too stressful and all that. So I was very adamant about, no, this needs to be just us, and no outside pressure, no outside stress, no outside expectations. And my husband accepted it because he realized how important it was for me. But then something very interesting happened during the birth, because, it took a long time. And, and I forgot to say that in the end, my mother-in-law couldn't actually come at all. So the whole thing was out of the question because, of passport issues. So that didn't work. But nevertheless, while, I was there with contractions, and it just took hours and hours. At some point I took a nap, and my husband went out of the room, and one of his cousins wrote him and said, "Hey, how's it going?" And he said, "Well, we're actually in the hospital." "Oh my goodness, do you want me to come by?" And alone, like, mentioning this offer of like, "Do you want me to be there with you?" was for me unimaginable, but very normal in that culture, right? I'm going to support you. I'm going to be there with you. I'm going to wait. I'm going to spend this time with you, this exciting time. And then that cousin actually came. And what I realized a few minutes later, after my husband said, "Oh, he's actually coming to be with me." And in that moment, I looked at my husband and I realized how hard it was for him not having his family there, because he had accepted my wishes, he had respected them, but at the same time, I hadn't really taken into account what was so important for him. So in the end, it turns out that there were 3 of his cousins who happily at that moment, like, luckily lived in Munich. They were there outside the room, and they were there because, it was a whole story. I was under anesthesia. So I was still asleep, but he came out with our daughter, and he had family, at least part of his family there to share this moment with him. And I think that meant a lot to him. And only afterwards I realized how important this was. And so I felt very, very thankful for them being there for him. Because, it was in a moment that important, your first daughter being born, not having a family around and knowing them to be several flight hours away was very hard for him. But it took me a while to realize that.
And I think to add, it's also depends very much on how the birth went.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that the support and something that where you maybe have a different picture in mind as something.
Yeah. No, for him it was
appreciate.
It was full support, and in hindsight, I'm so thankful that he had that. And I wish I had understood sooner. I had been more accepting of, or more aware of his needs in that moment.
What did you change when you got your second daughter? Was that a different experience? Did you have to communicate, like a talk?
Yeah, you know what? That was, unfortunately, we didn't even, there was not even an option, because that was during Corona. So we were happy, we were lucky that he could even be there. But that wasn't even a discussion. But we surely would have had to have that discussion had it not been for Corona. And still then, I think I would have struggled with, I don't know, his mom moving in for 3 months or something. But I surely would have talked to him more about, what do you need in that moment? Who do you want there to support you? So yeah, definitely opened my eyes to that.
So you guys, you are in Munich at the moment, both of you with 2 beautiful daughters. And as I heard as well, this is not going to be most probably the last destination of yours. So what's next?
So I think that was from the beginning when we started. So at least for my part, and I think it was the same for you. When we started into this relationship, we always said, wherever we choose to go now, this is a phase. And I think it would have been very, very hard for both of our husbands to know, okay, now it's Germany until the rest of your lives, and we're going to buy that house, and we're going to live here forever, and you're going to, join the Schützenverein, which is like a local club or something. So I think that would have felt more like prison rather than... Yeah, exactly.
Let's see where we find them in 30 years.
Not sure we'll join us shortly. You would be like, okay, I'm in. Put me in. Where do I have?
That'd be amazing. No, so that discussion was always on the horizon and still is. So now, of course, there are several factors, job-wise, and the ages of the kids, and when they go to school and all that. So it's not like we can just pack our bags tomorrow and leave, but for sure, we're always sort of having one eye out on the look for, are there opportunities in Spain, for example, I think that would, for us, would be a very realistic choice, but also even other countries. And that was clear to us from the beginning, to keep it fair, because we know our husbands are giving up a lot with living here. And my husband, it sounds simple, but he really struggles with the weather. You know, it's something that is so deeply ingrained. He grew up on the beach, basically. He's used to never having to wear a jacket. And that is such a deep part of him that he really, really struggles when now, you know, the whole month of July it rains. It really affects his mood. Or for example, when we were in Spain a few weeks ago, we were riding the metro and he said to me, you know why I'm so relaxed here and why sometimes I'm not as relaxed in Germany? Because in Germany, most of the time, I fear that someone is going to tell me that I'm doing something wrong. I'm not supposed to sit here. I'm walking on the wrong side of the street. I'm not supposed to drink here, or talking too loud, or talking on the phone, or whatever. So he always sort of has this feeling of, I'm doing something wrong. And he doesn't have that in Spain. And I think it's oftentimes it's these subtle feelings of being more relaxed and feeling at home in one place, or just more aligned with the way that one culture works.
And so for us, it's always also from the beginning, we always said, we just agree that whatever step we take, even if it is buying a house or changing job for the other person, it is always not necessarily reversible step, but it can be a step followed by another step. And with that, the fear of being locked, like you described it as well, it goes away. And I think it's the case for both of us. Even if we right now feel comfortable here, and I think also by and large my husband does. Obviously, he's homesick every now and then. We try to accommodate that by allowing him by himself, but also us as a family spending enough time in Italy. Sometimes he gets to the point where he's like not feeling well enough. In the sense, he's having something where he knows, okay, it's time. Then he will spend 3 days working from there, and I stay here with the kids because of school and so on. We can't go all together anymore, but we find ways of doing it. And what we said very early on, we don't ever want to get to the point where we have a discussion or we get to a situation where we blame the other one for the place we're living in. Because if we get to that point, yes, there's things where you can, like we said before, you know, we can discuss about the white bread and we can discuss about the weather and whatever, but like really deeply blame the other person. And so having said that as one of the basic rules, so to say, just made it clear from the get-go, before deciding to get married, before deciding where to move, that it's never, apart from the marriage, never a forever move. And so also for us, it's, yes, it's an option to go to Italy. It is also for him, I think, very much part of his dream for his children that they spend some time in the country and actually live it, not as a vacation place, but live a day-to-day life. Whether that's going to happen, we don't know. It is possible that we will always, at every opportunity, decide, no, it's not a good enough opportunity to do it, but then it is not a decision against Italy, against the culture, against the city, or any of that. It is just putting all things on the plate and or on the table and looking what's best for our family, individually for each member, but also us four together. And it's not always easy, but we try to do that. So we don't know where we'll end up, but we also we're open.
But I'm going to be honest, because I know when that moment comes and when let's say we take that decision, okay, we're going to move to Spain, let's say. I know I'm going to struggle. I know it's going to be very, very difficult for me because I'm going to miss my family like crazy. I will let Jeff, we'll have to get over the fact that we just, don't see each other that often. And there's all these things that everything that I love, that I feel comfortable. Of course, here, it's for me, it's easy. For me, it's so easy living here. It's the most natural thing. So I know I will have to I am going to struggle, but why? It just wouldn't be fair if I wasn't ready to put myself in the same situation, make the same sacrifices that my husband has done for me. I think that's what a relationship, a marriage is about. You can't always be the one who is the most comfortable and the happiest and the easiest if your partner is at the same time giving up things for you.
Do you also have to take the influence of your partner's family into consideration, may I ask, into your decision? I can't talk anymore. Sorry, decision making. Or how is that? Because I mean, for example, not just in Argentinian, like the family is always priority. And for example, the other day we had a situation where we would make a decision with his family without including me. And that wasn't so cool, to be honest. So we got over it. We talked out communication. But I was just so confused. I was like, oh, can't you just not involve me? It was a bigger decision. It wasn't a small thing, How is that for you? Like, is the Spanish side, I mean, obviously Venezuela, that's another topic because of the situation there right now. And the Italian side, are they like, hey, come over, we want to see our grandchild, or how is that at the moment?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, but I think that's I think that's what a lot of couples deal with, the expectations from the family, whether they are, living 3 hours away or 30 minutes. But no, for sure, that is something that we have to take into account. And also expectations, for example, especially about around holidays. For me, New Year's, for example, is just a normal day that I spend with friends, preferably, to having a party, having a nice evening with friends. In Venezuela, it's very much a family holiday. So that is something that we have to take into account, because you have to balance out, are you disappoint that family member, or are you just going to pull through with your preference? And you just have to weigh those two options. And then, of course, but I think that is true for everybody, as they get older, you don't know what's going to happen. And that might, because parents get older and they might need more assistance, maybe that will be the reason that we have to move somewhere someday. Mm-hmm. But I think it's hard to foresee that, right?
Mm-hmm. So in my case, they try to stay out of big decisions. They give their opinion, but they're very careful. Like they do want to give their opinion because they feel like it's also important for the grandchildren and so on. But it's, interestingly enough, especially for my mother-in-law, she is more like, come visit us, spend your vacation here, but don't move here. So that is, I think, more of a, because of the situation and the way she personally sees the situation in Italy, and because she's very comfortable with the life that we're living here. She sees the advantages of it. So I don't know if she also says, obviously I would be super happy if you were closer, I could see the kids every day and so on. I mean, that's very clear. It's not so much from that, but I think she's more reflected about it on what's not necessarily her own grandma wish, but what she wants for us as a family. So we see them a lot. They have, by now, they're used to more coming here, and my father-in-law has like his coffee places in the village where you live, and there's like an Italian that he can talk to and so on. So they've also adjusted a bit to, like, where initially they couldn't imagine why we would not live in the center of Munich, and now, like, actually it's not that bad for children.
Actually, I mean, that's also super cute how that generation, so your parents-in-law, our parents, my parents-in-law have formed a relationship. Yeah. And up to that point where when you got together with your husband, our parents signed up for a course to learn Italian. Mm-hmm. So they could communicate with the other, with your father-in-law.
And they send each other like cantuccini that my dad or our dad makes, and they bring music and so on. So they've I think in that, yes, we're really lucky that they've your mother-in-law that makes special Venezuelan dishes for Christmas.
Yeah.
Dessert. My mother-in-law that cooks and like the whole dinner for one of the Christmas days, and so like they all bring their part, and I think that's also been something really nice that we've managed apart from the Corona years, that we actually get both sides or all three parts of the family. So the Spanish-Venezuelan part, the German part, and the Italian part all together, and celebrate and have all the different kind of traditions that merge. And for our kids, there's the Babbo Natale coming, and there's the Christkind coming. They have like a little joint venture. There's Santa Claus and Baby Jesus
and Los
like,
Reyes.
and then for us the witch comes, and like the fire.
It's very busy around Christmas because everybody comes and brings presents.
But I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that they get more presents, but they like all have their part, and we try to. Also with little things, we've tried to make everyone comfortable. For example, we celebrate the 24th, and we say Frohe Weihnachten, and we specifically say it in German. And then on the 25th, which is the important Christmas day for the Italian family, we say Buon Natale. We don't say Frohen ersten Weihnachtsfeiertag or whatever, but we make sure that it is also in that the acknowledgement of they're just different traditions, and they're all equally important. So just because we celebrated the night before doesn't mean that we can't do it again the day after. And I think that has become a really nice way to merge all of those.
That not one tradition trumps the other one.
Yeah, exactly.
I can imagine, especially in the beginning, it must have been a challenge and maybe a little bit overwhelming as well to basically organize all of this.
Yeah, we did vacation after vacation.
I can imagine. But the way you explain it, I kind of want to be invited to your Christmas parties now.
You are. Come over. I'm not sure. We're nachos. Because then we have the Argentinian. Oh my! I know everybody gonna love that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that would be so lovely, But that really sounds like a whole adventure, and like days full of enjoyment and surprises. And yeah, that's so amazing. I love how you blend families and how you found your path over the past few years and how you made it all work. And I also know, and that's also a very, very important topic in my opinion, because since starting this podcast and since being on social media, I've learned that there are so many couples out there who are basically dealing with the same hurdles on the one hand and the same joyful moments an intercultural relationship brings. But as you know as well, it's not always so easy. So it takes a lot of patience, it takes a lot of time in general, it takes a lot of communication, and sometimes you're just sick of it and you're like, as I said before, you just have to explain yourself again, or at least this is how you feel like. And what I love as well is over the past few months especially, there's a whole support system that's building around that, and you are part of that. I would like to go at least a little bit into detail about what you're doing and about why you made this decision of what you're doing now.
Yeah, thank you. So, because we as sisters, of course, we're sharing this experience of having intercultural marriages. So pretty much from the beginning, there's always been this idea of intercultural relationships being different and more challenging at times, surely more complex than monocultural ones. So I've always thought, someone should write a book about that. Maybe I should write a book about that. And I didn't have a really concrete idea. But then, it took me a few years. But then last year, I finally decided how to channel that. So we started a little over a year ago, A Couple of Cultures, which is our account on Instagram. We're mainly on Instagram, but also a little bit on LinkedIn. And we sent out a newsletter. And the idea is really to have a place of support for intercultural couples and families, and to talk about from our own experience, but also from our background in coaching and intercultural, international work, actually, as a project manager, as a consultant, I've done a lot of like workshops and trainings, and I give lectures on conflict management. So we try to like put it all together and create tools and advice and tips for intercultural couples, because we found that there is a lot of there's a lot of power in community, as you said, as in this support system. And that also, I think we both have now over these many years of dealing with these different situations, we have, and especially then talking about it with each other, we've tried to find systematic ways of approaching these situations. Like, if your partner is living in your culture and has trouble to integrate, or if you are spending vacation in your partner's culture, or if you have different conflict styles, if your partner has trouble learning a language or just doesn't want to. So all of these day-to-day topics we're trying to address. And the cool thing is that just a few months ago, we have offered our first group online coaching course, which has been so much fun and so cool, because we got into personal contact with the participants. And and so over several weeks, we have talked about and taught them exercises and tools, and talked about things like conflict management, culture shock, making room for each other's cultures, taking big decisions together, because that's always, a very complex part of intercultural life. And it's just been the most fun and rewarding experience. And we get to, meet people like you, who we instantly connect with because we're all in the same boat.
True. Yeah, that's true. What I especially love is, in the end, it really doesn't matter where you're from. So you can definitely work it out as long as there's a will. Let's think like that. As long as you're open-minded towards that, there's almost no challenge that's too big. So for everyone who's listening and for everyone who's watching, what is the best way to contact you, actually, to get more information and to maybe even be part? Because I think you're launching again end of the year, most probably, right?
Yep.
So what's the way to go?
The way to go is first to follow us on Instagram, because that's where we communicate most frequently. Then to also get on our newsletter, which, we're not spamming anyone. We're just sending out regular news and more exclusive content. So that's a good opportunity. And then to just message us, especially when it comes to interest in our next coaching program. We're keeping the group still small. So if you're interested, then, just write us and tell us you want to get on the wait list, or you want to have more information. And that's the way to go.
Maybe we can put it in the show notes. I don't know.
Yeah. Of course, I will link. Your Instagram handle. But if you have any more information, such as a website, obviously,
we'll for sure
all this.
Yeah, we'll put our email address for sure, or you can also reach us directly.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. One last question before we end this conversation, before we're coming to an end, because it's getting late, and you said already, like, your husband's, no, wait, one of them is there and the other one is in already.
Yeah.
So we could even keep on talking for several more hours, and I think there are so many more topics to cover here. Before we come to an end, and everyone who is listening to the podcast on a frequent basis definitely knows which question is going to come now. What are your advices? So if you could give one advice, what would it be for intercultural couples?
So I think my advice would be and I think we've mentioned it before, actually, I think you actually mentioned it, and I just agree 100%, is that be ready to go through the hard parts of it all, because just know that with each challenge, you will be getting to know each other better and building more confidence as a couple. So just have confidence in your ability as a couple, and any challenge that comes, if there's a will, you will find a way.
And mine is, I think I've mentioned it before as well, but for me, it's always assume the best in the other person, whether it's your partner, your husband, your mother-in-law, your father-in-law, the friends. Assume that they have the best intentions and act so yourself.
Thank you so much for your time. It was amazing to get to know the two of you a little bit better and to spend some quality time here as well via Zoom. And I'm so excited for what's going to come next by you guys. So definitely keep me posted. And yeah, have a lovely evening.
Thank you
so much. It's been a lot of fun.
We will surely keep in touch. And I think it's so great that you're giving this platform to these couples telling their stories and just making it, giving it a stage for what's possible. So thank you so much. This has been so cool.
Thank you so much for watching and or for listening today. I hope you also enjoyed this episode, and I'm sure you've learned a lot as well. So as always, you will find all the information linked in the side note or in the podcast description. And feel free to contact me if anything. If you would like to share your story as well, you will also find a link below. I hope someday we are going to sit here, we're going to sit together, have a little communication about your love story. It doesn't necessarily have to be a love story, by the way. I get this asked quite often as well. It can also be another experience you've made while dating interculturally. Feel free to contact me. I'm always looking forward to meet different people from all over the world. Have a lovely morning, have a lovely afternoon, have a lovely evening, wherever you're listening or watching, and see you soon. Bye!